Welcome to episode 47 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. In this episode's main segment, I'm interviewing Jeremy Culver. Jeremy is a writer and director who just completed an independent film called An Evergreen Christmas. We get into some real detail about how his film came together, so stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube, or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking us on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they are greatly appreciated. I'd like to thank over on iTunes. I got two very nice reviews. Thank you to Majus1 and Michelle Kinor. Both left me really nice reviews, and I really do appreciate those. Over on YouTube, thank you to Robert Kiley and Eunice Alferis, who left me some nice comments on episode 44. Thank you guys for those. And on Twitter, Ink Moves retweeted episode 43. Thank you for the retweet. And on Facebook, Naheen Swatoranrato and Sarita Johnson and Ray Chen all liked some of the recent episodes, so thank you all for that. Our Facebook page is growing nicely, so please do like it if you get a chance. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts. And then just look for episode number 47. Also, if you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide: how to write a professional logline inquiry letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. A quick few words about what I'm working on. I've actually been spending most of my writing time recently writing a big budget studio action adventure sci-fi film. We're still in flux on our pitch, but right now we're pitching it as Men in Black meets E.T. I'm working with another writer on this project. It's the writer who runs the writers group that I am in. Hopefully the whole will be greater than the sum of the parts. At least that's the idea. At this point, I've got several low budget projects that I'm trying to get out there, so I feel like trying something totally different will allow me to market to different types of producers and hopefully expand my reach a bit. We're hoping to have a draft done by the end of the year, but that's looking less and less likely. Certainly by early next year, I would say late January at the latest, we'll hopefully have a nice draft of this script done. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm talking with writer-director Jeremy Culver. Here is the interview. Welcome, Jeremy, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Great. So to start out, I wonder if you can give us a quick overview of your career in the entertainment industry and how you got started.
Yeah, I actually came to the entertainment aspect of it relatively later. I didn't come up through the film school route. I did come up doing production and have a degree in production. And from there, I started doing, I think probably a pretty typical route where you start doing commercials and that leads to one thing and it leads to another and you start doing bigger and bigger commercials. And then I was also done a lot of multimedia. Our family business is computer-based training where we design courseware and design kind of like classroom of the 21st century kind of thing and do these big installations. So there's always these multimedia components to that. And so production was always part of my vocabulary from college on. And then, you just kind of one day wake up and say, you just really want, on the commercial side, I was really having a difficult time creating content for products that I didn't believe in. And I know that, like some people are wired that way and they can find a passion in the process, but the passion in the process, just kind of went away from me, and I really wanted to focus on material that I wanted to be a part of and give myself to, and that's when I stepped into writing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let's just go back and take us back to the beginning, just so kind of people have maybe an idea of the scope. So were you like a film major and you got into basically commercials and industrials right out of college? And I assume right out of college that means you basically start as a production assistant and then work your way up. Maybe just give us a little bit of background, like real specifics on what exactly that looked like once you kind of started professionally in production.
Yeah, actually, my degree is more in television production. So it's not it wasn't a film based. It was a television studio based, kind of ENG based type thing. And you know, I was very fortunate that right out of college, I actually started my own production company. You know, I had this entrepreneurial background with the family and had some content to immediately start working on with the multimedia side. And then this is in the Philadelphia area, and so I started on the commercial side doing commercials for Comcast clients. You know, Comcast had their ad sales, and so there's production companies who would support those clients. And I was fortunate enough to make a good presentation to some of the sales reps, and they started referring me to clients, and that's really how I got started on the commercial side. But you know, I was very fortunate that I was able to start my own business. And you know, there's a lot of lessons. I mean, education is expensive, whether you get it in college or whether you get it in the real world. And I certainly, my education certainly wasn't cheap.
Yeah. Though, okay, but so then you were literally directing and producing these commercials, and that kind of gave you sort of the production chops to slowly move into features. Yeah,
the great thing about film, and, you know, because I've done stage as well, and they're completely different animals. The great thing about film is that, you know, there's so many hats you need to wear, from the creative side to, there's a very diplomatic side to it in dealing with people, and there's also obviously the technology side. And, you know, I believe you really have to have an extensive vocabulary in all those areas. And so doing those commercials and directing and producing the commercials and editing the commercials, in my first editing system I actually built myself because I had the money to go out and buy a really expensive one, so I just built one, you know, on an Adobe Premiere platform. And then once business started taking off, you know, I moved into what was at the time called a discrete system that was since discontinued, but they do like smoke and fire, that line of products. So, you know, I got real hands-on training on all aspects of putting a production together from the pre all the way to the post, and I was really responsible for all aspects of that in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so now take us back to that sort of that moment. Okay, so you wake up one day and you're sitting there thinking, I really want to do something more on you know, the feature film end of things. Did you just start writing? Had you been writing screenplays for a while? What was your first step to make that transition from commercials to features?
Well, it was, you know, the Charlene Clossie, who stars in the film, was actually my fiance. And, you know, we've been together for a while. And so there's an artistic side in all our conversations at that point. And by this point, I was doing, like, national type infomercial type stuff. I'd just done something with Hooked on Phonics, which was a great project and a great product. But I had a couple bad experiences with some other projects, and I was just like, you know, I just don't want to do this. This isn't who I want to be. And we were living in L.A. at the time, and Charlene was doing a lot of theater. And, you know, just started networking, started talking to people, and came across a gentleman who had this idea for a short film that he wanted to do. And he lived in Malibu. And so I just sat down and I talked him through creatively, like, how I would do it. And he really liked the idea. And so he hired me to help him write the screenplay and direct it. And, you know, he was an older gentleman who could still out-hype me. The guy's amazing, but, you know, he has a PhD in philosophy from Cornell, and, a real breadth of experience, and he was a poet. And so that was my first short film, and it was called Walking with Francis. So it was a supposition of the last days of St. Francis of Assisi. Okay. So it was a real meaty subject from a historical perspective to dive in. And at the time, my sister, who is actually 10 years younger than I, she had a creative writing degree from Rollins College in Florida, and she and I were approached about an idea that we had, which ended up being an Evergreen Christmas, by a producer. And so, you know, the first time, you know, that was our first screenplay actually that we started writing.
Was Walking with Francis or an Evergreen Christmas?
An Evergreen Christmas was the first feature screenplay. that we had. I mean, we've written a number since, and, you know, throughout the process, we were always writing other ideas, but that's the first one that we actually started and you know, pitched the idea and really just went through the process. And, you know, we wrote it over on and off for over a year. So.
Okay. So let's dive into An Evergreen Christmas. Maybe first you can kind of pitch us a log line or a quick synopsis so we have an idea of sort of what the story is about.
Well, Evergreen Christmas tells the story of a young woman named Evie Lee who comes from a small town in Tennessee, and she's moved to Los Angeles to pursue her music dreams. And we meet her in Los Angeles, and you know, she's really just basically a PA for kind of a Lady Gaga archetype. And she gets the unfortunate news that her father has suddenly passed away, so she needs to go back to the small town, and her family owns a Christmas tree farm. So she needs to go back to the small town for her father's funeral. Well, while there, she learns that she is actually was made executor of the estate. And because of the estate tax, there's a problem. If the situation isn't resolved or a solution isn't found, then the family loses the farm. And now this is all her responsibility. And so through the process of figuring this problem out, reconnecting with her family, with her younger brother, who is also a musician but stayed there, so there's a lot of resentment there on his part. So through the process of figuring out this solution to this problem, she reconnects with her roots, and not only from a family standpoint, but also from a musical standpoint, and really fulfills all the goals that she had set out for herself when she left.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So then let's kind of move into what was that process like? You said you wrote it with your sister. So how did that process sort of come about? And, you know, what does that even look like on like sort of a day-to-day practical level of writing with your sister?
You know, we have, I mean, for us, we both agreed up front that, and we're very process-oriented. I mean, writing is a very structured endeavor. People kind of, you know, people that don't write, sometimes, you know, they're like, well, how does, you know, they sit down, they start to write, and it's kind of from beginning to end. And, you know, we approach everything from a very structured standpoint, you know, with the note cards on the wall and everything. And we kind of like look at it like, you know, we're trying to whittle a sculpture out of a block of marble, and that takes multiple passes and multiple tools. And, but the one thing we agreed on up front is that there has to be integrity in the process. And so, and what I mean by that is it is going to be structured. We're going to figure out all the story beats. And when we disagree on things or we have ideas, we always have to defend those ideas. And if we can't defend them, then it really means we're just speaking from ego, and we don't want our ego in the story. And so if I have an idea and she doesn't quite understand it, you know, I have to be able to defend it, and vice versa. You know, she has these great ideas, and if I'm just not quite there, you know, she's ready to defend it, and we talk it through. And, you know, that kind of conflict resolution, if you want to call it, with ideas, has been invaluable to our process, because we've maintained the integrity of the process and throughout, and to this day, of every script that we've written, you know, it's a process we follow.
Mm-hmm. So what does that just look like? So you go through the outline. How long? And you're both physically sitting in the same room. You have the note cards on like a bulletin board. You're spitballing ideas, and then how long do you spend doing this? And correct me if anything I'm laying out there is incorrect. I'm kind of just curious of what your process actually looks like.
Yeah. We try to be in the same room as much as possible. In the very beginning, we were absolutely in the same room every single day, and it was, you know, color-coded note cards. We figured out, you know, story we want to tell. We figured out the structure of the story we wanted to tell. Is it just a classical 3-act structure, or is it more like a, you know, Act 1, Act 2A, Act 2B, Act 3 kind of thing? And figured out what serves the story the best. And then we basically just go through with each act and figure out the story beats, and, you know, it's kind of, you know, we color code the acts on the wall, and once we figure out all the story beats, you know, there's a lot of ideas that get up on the wall, and then something better comes along, and we pull that idea down, and we put a new idea, and then once we're pretty satisfied that we have something that we can actually start writing, we'll start the writing process. You know, we actually even do a bad idea burning party before we actually start into the script, which is all the bad ideas that we pulled off the wall. We actually go and burn those and release those back out into the world, and you know. And then we start, you know, actually writing the script, and we'll just pull a card down, and we'll write those scenes, And and through that process, we get to a first draft. And obviously, the writing process, there's part of, you want to keep it structured so you have a beat pattern that you can follow, but you also don't want to take away the magic of the moment. And so we're very open to that, sometimes you start writing the scene and it just goes somewhere that you don't even expect. And we're very much aware that happens, and we want that to happen. So we allow for that within the working structure. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then once you're on to the actual writing of the scenes, are you writing some scenes, she's writing some scenes, and then you get together and merge them, or are you both sitting in the same room, literally typing, and one person's looking over the other's shoulder as the other person types?
No, we actually write. We'll give each other assignments, and we'll go and write our scenes, and then we'll come back and we'll give notes on each other's scenes. And some of the notes are simply just from, let's make sure we're keeping this active rather than passive, and that, because that's what scripts are. They're action documents, and so other ones are like, wow, okay, something really just magical happened. Now this is going to affect the rest of the story, so we need to make sure that we want this character to go down this direction and how that's going to reconcile to the rest of the story. Mm-hmm. And so our notes will be basically somewhere within that paradigm.
Yeah. So just, and roughly speaking, how long would you guys say you spend on the outline versus the actual writing of the script, just in like a percentage? Is it like a 20, 80, 40, 60? What do you think the break is?
It's tough because each story is different. Mm-hmm. And as we continue to write, the process has evolved because, we don't have the flexibility to be in the same room all the time anymore. And so we will still do the same process virtually. Sometimes the story just is already there and it just happens very quickly. Other times, we spend relatively speaking, a lot of time on the outline, and then the script comes really easily as a result. So I think it's really a case-by-case situation. I wish I could give you a blanket answer. But I think the answer is we spend as much time as needed in each phase of the process. And obviously sorry?
No, that's a great answer. I can totally see that.
Yeah, and we are, with an Evergreen Christmas, she was on set and we were rewriting still every day. With me being the director, obviously, you start working with your actors and you start seeing some of the attributes that they can bring, and create an environment that's creative where they feel like they have a voice in the process as well. Mm-hmm. And as a result, really great things can be spontaneous. And so we're writing it every day, because an actor will come up with an idea or do something and we want to be open to it. But again, it needs to reconcile and we need to be able to defend it with the whole story. Mm-hmm. And so that process really carries through during production as well, and bringing other people into that collaboration.
One thing, I'm writing a script with someone right now, and he has a very distinct voice, which is one of the reasons why I'm writing it with him, because I like his voice. How do you merge the two? Do you ever find that the pages you write are just written in a slightly different voice than the pages your sister writes? And how do you kind of merge it into one document so that the entire script feels like it was written by one coherent person?
I think from our perspective, and that's a really great question, and I think that that's probably the biggest pitfall of an honest collaboration. And I say an honest collaboration because there's a lot of pitfalls with collaborations that deal with ego and people just want their way. But, during an integrity process, if integrity is in place, to me the biggest pitfall is just different voices. And we're very, we focus on the voice of each character and how that person speaks. And we have those conversations about, okay, well, what is this person's speech pattern? What is this person's unique voice? And, we agree on what that is. So when we're writing those characters, we've already talked about what that voice should be, and it's based on the character, not based on our writing style. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, and it's funny, a family will read the script and they swear that Morgan wrote this part, and it turns out I did. And vice versa, and it happens all the time. It's kind of like funny, well, who wrote this? And I'm happy about that because they don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take us kind of through that process now that we have the script. You've written the script, and then what was sort of your first step to actually getting this thing produced? What did you do? Maybe you can take us through that process of having the raw script and actually getting to the point where you have financing and are shooting this thing.
Using Evergreen Christmas as an example?
Correct.
Yeah. That was, film, especially independent film, deals come together in so many different ways. And so, the way this came about is that we had an idea. We were working with a producer who had an idea she wanted to do a Christmas film. And we had this idea because our grandfather actually owns a Christmas tree farm. So it was just kind of a random conversation that she wanted to do a Christmas film because it makes financial sense. They're good and it's family based, and we had this idea of a story that we wanted to tell. And so we, at that point being unknown, we said, okay, well, we'll write this on spec, which is risky, but we wanted to write the story, and there was a captive audience that wanted to know wanted to read the script. So that was encouraging. Well, about halfway through that process, the financing on that deal completely fell apart. And so we were like, wow, okay, that happens, but it was, that was kind of our carrot, is that we thought, okay, well, the financing's there, all we need to do is deliver a good product, and, this movie can be made. When the financing fell apart, we were, we had a major decision to make at this point. Were we doing this because we thought it would end in a deal, or were we doing this because we want to tell the story and we want to do the writing? And I was living in Malibu at the time, and Morgan, who's a Florida resident, had flown out, and she was, staying with us for, a month at this point. And we really had, sat down and really had an honest conversation, and we both decided that, we're going to finish this story. And we don't know what's going to happen with it, but we started it, and it's really important that we finish it. And if nothing happens with it, we can be proud of the work that we've done. So we finished the story, and then I'm at the Palm Springs Film Festival the next year and run into the same producer and said, started talking and said, that story, we finished it. And she's like, oh my goodness, I would love to read it. And she read it and absolutely loved it. And at the same time, Charlene and I were looking for a project to do together to take advantage of her skills, because she's so talented as an actress and a musician, and she actually composed a score for the film. And, one thing just led to another, that the producer got on board, and we started going out there and raising the financing, and people loved the story. They loved the idea, and the financing came in place, and really good people came on board, and we started looking at places to film and where we could get incentives and putting the whole package together, and everything just kind of fell into place. We're really fortunate. But I think it's because, at the end of the day, we didn't stop. You just got to, the writer's right, and you just got to do it, and you don't know what's going to happen after that. You can't really plan unless somebody's hiring you to write something. And that's completely different. That's a completely different animal.
So I wonder, and this is just kind of a quick aside, the producer who ended up, you originally worked with, and then I guess she ended up producing it ultimately. How did you meet her? I'd love to hear sort of just those details of how you actually met this producer originally.
We actually were doing an event in Sarasota, Florida, which is a really big arts town. And they were doing a kind of a roundtable, and she had flown in for that, and we had met her at that, and she had just done her first feature actually. And so this was years ago, and we just kind of struck up a friendship, based on mutual respect, and that's why, so that conversation was already out there. But at that point, nobody had any idea where anybody's career was going to go, because I wasn't even writing at that point when I met her. And she had just done her first film, and which was showing there, and getting ready to do her second film. And
when you say an event, what exactly does that mean? Like a film festival, or like some sort of media event for your commercial side of your business? What was this event?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it was just a one-off event where it was a screening to get feedback on films. And so it was an idea that Charlene's mother actually had, because she was on the board of the Sarasota Film Festival at one point. And it was tied into that network, and they're Florida natives, so bringing when you're not in LA or New York, these states, they do these events to try to attract filmmakers, and Florida's a place where a lot of film has been done, especially when they have their incentives. And Sarasota's a town that people like to go to, so they just put off an event to see if it would gain any traction. And the event was basically like a 2-day screening of films where the audience was able to participate and give feedback on the films. And some films were complete, other films were kind of in development. And yeah, I totally forgot this part. We were working on a short film. This was actually the first short film. And I didn't mention it before because it never got finished, but we had shot a short film in the Florida area, in the Tampa area, and with Charlene starring and our DP on it, Evergreen Christmas, who DP'd it, and it was the first time we all worked together, and it was a great project. It's just other things got in the way of finishing it, but so that screened at that event as a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's clear.
Sorry about that. I totally,
no problem at all. Yeah, no, I just like to dig into things and make sure it's clear for me and for the audience. One other thing I wanted to just touch upon, something you said, you were writing this script on spec, and it sounds like the financing fell through, so you kind of lost touch, at least temporarily, with this producer. I just want to clarify, it sounds like, you maintained full ownership of this material. The producer didn't come in and try and, make you sign some sort of an option agreement or ownership agreement ahead of time. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, but there was a legal process with that, and that's the biggest thing is understanding, I think, for writers who are creating original content. I mean, if you don't have a lawyer have a working understanding of how the law works, I think is really imperative. Because when we said that, one of the things that when the financing fell through, we said, okay, well, there was this idea, and we were partly using some of our idea, but other parts using the idea that the producer, for the kind of film the producer wanted to make, because that's the kind of film that she thought would sell. Mm-hmm. When the financing fell through, one of the things that we did is said, okay, well, we don't want to use those story ideas. We want to go deeper into our story ideas and base it more on our family and base it more on our personal experience with our grandfather's Christmas tree farm in Michigan. And so, we had to draw up, and credit to her, and got a lawyer involved and said, look, these are the story ideas that we brought to the table. We want to develop these ideas further. These ideas are based on our family and our personal experience, and we just don't want a claim made down the road that these are your ideas. And so we drew up a document, and she signed it. And, she didn't have to, but she honored the process, and we were very clear that we weren't going to use any of her ideas, and, and we didn't. And when she read our final screenplay, she was, I think really pleased, obviously, with the ideas, with the story we came up, but also that we honored our agreement that we weren't going to use her ideas as well. So there was a legal process associated with that. And that could have gone completely differently, and oftentimes it does.
Yeah. And then she's re-involved. You meet her, you give her the complete script, she reads it, she sees her ideas are not in it. Then did she say, hey, what about putting some of my original ideas back in it to get this thing financed?
No, we never had that conversation.
Okay. Huh. Great. So now you mentioned too, so go ahead.
No, she's a producer, so she's always going to have ideas, and you always, I think a good working relationship with a producer is that, you honor the ideas, and she understood how we work by that point that, we love to listen to ideas. I think people that don't want to listen to ideas, again, that's an ego thing. And, and she gave great notes throughout the process through subsequent drafts and everything. She gave great notes, and we were very fortunate for that. And like with anything, every note has to be defensible. And, when she gave a note that we didn't agree with, we're like, this is why we don't agree with it. And she's like, oh, it makes perfect sense. And obviously when she gave a note, we're like, wow, that really helped unlock something for us. This is great. So, but there was never the conversation about putting any of her ideas back in, because it was just a different story at that point. It was its own story, and it just would have been, unnatural.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't have done that because, it wouldn't have served, our story went in such a different direction.
Okay. So now you mentioned that you reconnected where they're at this Palm Spring Film Festival. Was there a reason you were at the Palm Spring Film Festival? Did you have like was a short in the competition, or you just were there just to check it out?
Charlene was in a film that was shown at the Palm Springs Film Festival. So being the good, fiance that I am, I accompanied her.
Yeah. Let's see. I wonder too. I get a lot of writers coming to me, kind of asking about the process of raising the money. Were you at all involved on that? And I wonder if you could give some sort of just some general tips for writer producers who maybe want to try and shoot their own film and need to go out and raise some money.
Yeah, I was involved, especially being the director. So, you're helping putting the package together, and I was also a co-producer in the project. So, everywhere from where we set up the production, I had a say in that and help formulate that, because from that perspective, for me, the location needs to serve the story. Obviously, you need to have a qualified crew that can help you tell the story. And that's really important. And then you need to have some kind of, for me, for a lot of people, you need to have some kind of incentive package, especially in independent film. So you want to go to states who have all three of those that fit your story, and not, everybody goes incentives first. And I don't think that's, incentives are third on my list. Again, it's serving the story first, because if you're not serving the story, then why are you making the film? And second is, having people that can help you tell the story. If you don't have those people, you're going to go over every single day, and you're just not going to get your vision in the can. And then third is the financial incentives to help you do that. So I think that raising the money is really obviously it's a really critical a point, because you can't make the movie without it. But you also can't make the movie without a great script, without actors who want to be in it, and all those things really go hand in hand. I see people a lot of times, they focus on just the money. And I think you lose a little bit of ownership of your creation if you just focus on the money. I think the money and the creation are really in a relationship, and they both need to work for both parties. And so I think philosophically, just looking at it that way, gives you more ownership of your process. It gives you more confidence. And I think when you go and you meet with potential investors, that shows through. That makes, I know it's not really like a surface answer, but I think that it's really important that people not lose sight of that. Now, the other side of that is people kind of say, well, the money's just the money, and they're not creative, and and it's all about my work and everything. I think that's incorrect too. I really think it has to be a symbiotic relationship, because one can't live without the other.
Yeah, for sure. So I wonder if you can talk about sort of what's on the horizon for you. I looked at your IMDb page, and Radical Kindness, it looks like that's completed, and looks like you're working on a movie called Hushabye. I wonder if you can kind of tell us, even in just broad strokes, sort of how those came about. And do you think, just in terms of your own career arc, has one thing led to another? Have you gotten those things going independently?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really unique place. The Hushabye project has kind of been put on hold because it was more of like the spiritual horror genre. Not horror, but, with the spiritual, historical narrative approach. But, my sister's pregnant right now, and we just determined that's probably not the best time to write that story while she's pregnant. You want the baby listening to, Mozart through the womb, not the mother thinking about, these really stressful, tense scenes. So we put that on hold for a while. We're into a couple drafts of the script, and we have a long way for it to go, but we put that on hold. And so we've been working on a modern-day adaptation of a classic 18th century English novel set in the South. So that's what we've been working on now, and then I'm also getting ready to produce another project that we should have deal memo signed for hopefully in the next week, and that's going to be a really big project. It's going to be a great project, and I'm just producing on that, which I'm looking forward to, because producing is a very different way of looking at the world, and it's very different than writing. And while we're working on some of these other scripts, it'll be nice to work on somebody else's script and provide value in that way. And not have to, so it keeps the integrity again of the writing process in place, where we can take our time and do it correctly. So
So I wonder, maybe you can just give us too kind of some ideas about how people can check out an Evergreen Christmas. Is it going to be released theatrically? Obviously, it'll come out on video on demand at some time. Maybe you have some release dates and can tell us the best way for people to see it.
Yeah, it's coming out November 4th, which is next week. So it's releasing across all the VOD platforms, and Walmart, Amazon. We are not doing theatrical on it. You start looking at the business structure. Theatrical is really hard these days, and just a P&A that goes into it and recouping it. So you kind of look at every film and see, okay, what's the life of the film? And since it's a Christmas film and it's annual, we look at kind of a 10-year plan as far as what we want this film to be and how a multi-year release strategy looks like, doing VOD and across every platform and in stores first, and then we do Netflix. We go on Netflix on December 21st, and then the subsequent years we'll negotiate the TV premiere and so on and so forth. And we have a really great distributor, Arc Entertainment, who has our pulse on. I mean, distribution's changing rapidly. And we're very fortunate. Our producers and our executive producer, have a great business background and a great business sense, and so we can look at these things objectively and do the spreadsheets and really get a plan together. And ARC has been great with that. So
yeah. I'm curious. Do you get any sense? A lot of the producers I talk to, they still tell me the same thing with what you're kind of saying, that family-friendly films is actually still in a very underserved market, relatively speaking. Do you find? Have you found that a Christmas Story even though it is family, does a Christmas Story play internationally? I'm curious if outside territories. Obviously, if it's not a Christian country, probably doesn't play quite as well. But in Europe and stuff, does Christmas Stories play pretty well?
Yeah, they do. I mean, it's different structure foreign. I mean, the foreign sales markets are completely different. A lot of the revenue is generated through television over there, and Christmas definitely plays. And we had a lot of suitors on the foreign side because of that. So, yeah, absolutely, it plays. Okay. And it plays in the Middle East as well. I mean, I think we sold the Middle East and we sold Turkey, I believe. So, but there are a lot of Christians in that, but, it transcends that as well. And there's just a lot of people who love Christmas. I've been very fortunate to travel all around and live overseas, and, I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East. And it's amazing how much people love this ideal of Christmas, like the snow and the Christmas trees and everything. And that's something that's really transcendent around the world, I've found.
Great. What's the best way for people to keep up with you and follow what you're doing? Maybe you can mention your Twitter handle or website or anything like that. I can link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, my Twitter is, and I'm just getting this whole Twitter thing down. There's a whole, like, when you're releasing a film, people need to reach you and they're interested, and I'm admittedly a little bit behind on that type of stuff. But I'm also not an actor, so I don't need to be as up with that. Yeah. But my Twitter handle is at Jeremy, Jeremye, which is my middle initial, Culver, Culver.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
And I'm on Facebook. I don't have a website at this stage.
Okay, perfect. I will link to that stuff, and I think I noticed that there was a Twitter handle for an Evergreen Christmas, so I'll find that and I'll put that in the show notes as well, so people can just click over and follow along. Well, Jeremy, you've been very insightful, lots of great information for screenwriters. I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking with me today.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to talk about this. I think independent film is, it's really important that the community all supports each other, because there's a lot of great stories out there that need to get out, and but it's also a tough business. So I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just a quick plug for my email and fax blast query service. Just in the last year, I've optioned 4 scripts, sold 1 script, and got 1 paid writing assignment. And all of this came from using my own email and fax blast query service. Here's how it works. First, you join SYS Select. Then you post your logline and query letter in the SYS Select forum. I will personally review your logline and query letter and help you make them as good as they possibly can be. Then you purchase the blast and I send it out for you. The emails are sent as if they're coming from your email address, so all replies go directly back to you. You can exclude specific companies if there are some companies you don't want to send to for whatever reason. Maybe you've already submitted to them. It's easy to exclude them from the blast. To learn more, just check out www.sellingyourscreenplayselect.com to learn more. So, in next episode of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer, director, and actor Angus Sampson. Angus recently wrote, directed, and starred in a film called The Mule. We talk about his career and how he broke in as an actor and was able to parlay that into writing and directing. He's very entertaining, very Australian, which is to say he's just super friendly and down to earth. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Jeremy. One of the main things that I really noticed is how he was able to maintain focus even when the project seemed to be going off track. He talks about having a producer, they didn't get financing, things kind of wound down, and then he still was able to maintain focus and continue to write this script and get it finished. This is very, very important because if you're going to be a professional screenwriter, lots of projects are going to disintegrate on you. It's just the nature of the business. You know, he was able to maintain focus and finish writing the script even after this letdown, and he was able to maintain a friendly enough relationship with the producer to pick back up whether a few years later. I mean, this is so important, you know, building and then maintaining these relationships. It's also worth noting, you know, he was out and about at a film festival when he reconnected with this producer. I mean, that's really how this business works. On the surface, it might seem coincidental or lucky, but you've got to put yourself out there enough that you're going to find these sorts of moments where luck seems to shine on you. It's just the old story, you know, if you have a 1 in a million chance of actually hitting that lucky break, you've just got to do that thing a million times. And at some point you actually have the odds in your favor. So that's really the main takeaway for me is just, you know, maintaining focus, maintain relationships, and keep trying to work on the projects, even when you hit roadblocks, because you're going to hit roadblocks with every project you work on. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.